Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show, and man, my co-pilot for this week. I mean, he's always in the ready room. He's always ready to jump into that co-pilot seat. But Spencer Holbrook, man, thanks for joining me last minute. It's been quite a. I'll get into it in a second, but it's been quite a climb to get to this recording of this podcast.
Aren't all flights just big climbs, Tim? That's all
Yeah.
we're doing here is climbing into the sky to talk about Ohio State football. What could be better than this?
That's right. We have already officially taken off. The gears. We've had a positive rate of climb. The gear is up, and we're going to talk about a few things, including coming out of Ohio State spring football question. Maybe a couple of questions that were answered, and a couple of huge questions that weren't answered, in my opinion. And then I promised Pete Nakos I was going to do a live look into his little cockpit there right outside the transfer portal, because nobody keeps over the transfer portal better than our friend, your longtime friend, Pete Nakos of on3.com, right?
Yeah. Pete is doing some great work for the big brand. And the way that he handles the portal is second to none.
Yeah. Well, we'll get a little look in at him. I mean, in the midst of it all, as we record this on the first day of the transfer portal, spring 2024. But I digress. I did want to get to a couple of condolences here, though. My One of my great friends ever, and people know he and I are like milk and shake on Sunday nights during the football season on Wall to Wall Sports. But one of my great friends ever, Dom Taberry, lost his mom early this week, and I want to send out condolences here because I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there's fewer nicer people in the world you're going to run into than Dom Taberry, and he's had quite the road to hoe here the first several months of 2024. My heart goes out to him, goes out to his family, and Dom, I'm always thinking about you. You know that, man. And then the guy I really had scheduled here, the reason Spencer Holbrook had to jump into the co-pilot seat was Matt Wilhelm, former linebacker at Ohio State, former NFL linebacker. You folks all know him. He's been a popular part of this podcast for a while now, and he and I are going to do a lot more things this coming fall. By the way, a little tip off there, but his mom suddenly passed away earlier this week, and my condolences out to Matt. I mean, it's never ever a good time to lose your mom. I lost my mom when I was 67 years old, and miss her every day. But I wasn't around her probably nearly as much as Dom was with his mom and Matt Wilhelm was with his mom. But my heart goes out to both of you guys, Dom and Matt, and you know, get through the week, and life moves on. But that's tough. That's tough news anytime, isn't it, Spencer?
Yeah, I mean, especially with Mother's Day right around the corner next month, right? Just make sure
Yeah.
to call your mom, tell her you love her. Lucky enough to still have my mom around. So, thoughts and prayers go out to both of those guys. Dom has, 2019, and when I walked into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for the first time, Dom kind of welcomes you in with open arms, introduces himself, asks you, who you are, and from there you kind of just run with it. And he's been nothing but great to me. Matt, same way. I've met Matt a couple times. Great guy. So hoping for the best for those guys, and definitely thinking about him this week.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of thinking about things, Ohio State went into the spring seeking to find, I'm not sure this is accurate way of putting it, but it was my way of putting it, seeking to find a starter at quarterback among five combatants. Really, probably two when you really size it up, right? But I'm not sure they came out of spring. They may have come out of spring with a somewhat of a pecking order, but did they find that ultimate starter, the guy that wowed you every time you watched him? The times we got to watch him, uh, the the time people got to watch in the spring game on this past Saturday, that didn't happen, did it? I mean, I think Will Howard would probably be first in line based on a lot of criteria, but I think Devin Brown is in there pitching, man, uh, competing hard. I don't think he's been forgotten in this race. And just when we expect to see Julian Sayin, really light up things on Saturday in this past spring game, he had like, not mediocre, but he had basically an average outing or below average outing based on what we had seen before and what we were hearing about him in the spring. And then lo and behold, Lincoln Keno's throws what, a couple of interceptions, and then a guy I think a lot of people have given up on, Aaron Noland. He leads 2 touchdown drives. Yeah, it was with kind of the scrubs on his side, but it was against the scrubs on the other side. Still let them down the field to 2 touchdowns in that game. So what did we learn about the quarterback situation? You've been covering this team now for going on 6 years. Isn't that right? Do I have that right, Spence?
Yeah,
6 years, right?
this will be my 6th year. Yeah.
Yeah. What do we know about the quarterback race we didn't know going into it?
I think it's more of a 2-man race than it is a 3-man race at this point. And I think that's different from what we thought going into the spring, right? We thought that it was a 3-man race between Will Howard, Devin Brown, and Lincoln Keenholz. I think that's kind of been pared down a little bit, compared to what we might have thought at the beginning of March, especially after Lincoln Keenholz had the up and down game against Missouri, but also gave himself a little bit of boost of confidence. He didn't look great in that game, but also played in that game, and that was enough to give him the confidence he needed going into the spring. I think it's more of a 2-man battle at this point. I still don't think Julian Sayin is going to be able to get to the point with this offense where, Ohio State trusts him with all of this talent. I don't, maybe in a different year you could talk yourself into trusting a true freshman to run the offense. This year, with this much talent and this much on the line for Ryan Day, I think there's just a little too much at stake for a true freshman to go into the season. So I'm going to say that what we learned most of all is that this is a 2-man race between Devin Brown and Will Howard. I still give the edge to Will Howard because of what I said on Saturday, what he can do in a non-contact setting. You know what I'm saying? Like in a full
Yeah.
contact thing when the team is.
He's a gamer. You keep
Yeah.
saying, I'll just sum it up for folks. You believe he's a gamer, but how coaches hate gamers. I'm talking about in a preparation standpoint. Go ahead.
Yeah, reporters hate gamers too, if you know what I'm saying, Tim. But
Yeah,
I
exactly what you're saying.
I still think Will Howard's going to have the edge in this, but I do think that it's a good 2-man battle, and I would say that we pared it down a little bit from the 3 that we thought going into spring.
Yeah, but people always ask me, am I concerned? Am I worried? Well, I'm not playing. I'm not even on the team, but I just keep looking back at Springs. Did I expect an explosion on Saturday of offense? No, because I knew they weren't going to call anything out of the ordinary, number one. Number two, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world, Ohio State's going to have a damn good defense this fall. Urban Meyer thinks that. When I was texting with him a little bit after the game, you saw what Joel Klatt had to say. Fox did the game, national telecast. I think it's pretty obvious that this has the potential to be a good, if not great, defense, especially in this era. It has a chance to be as good a defense as there will be in the country this year. I think you agree with me on that, don't you? Don't you, Spence?
Yeah. I think it's loaded for bear, as you would say, Tim.
It's loaded for zips. So to begin with, go ahead now.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be impressive to watch, and I'm pretty confident in saying that. So, any of these quarterbacks who struggle against this defense, I'll kind of give them a little bit of a pass. And maybe that's excuse making on the part of trying to talk yourself into one of these quarterbacks being incredible come this season. Yeah. But when they're going against this talent on defense, and some of those guys weren't even playing. Cody Simon didn't need a lot of reps. He was just going through thud stuff. Lathan Ransom, Malik Hartford didn't go through spring. Caleb Downs didn't really do a whole lot the spring game. And that defense is still making all those plays. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, when they're not making the plays and they're not doing a whole lot and they're still looking impressive, that tells you the talent level that's assembled here on this defense. I think it's the number one defense in the country with a bullet. And I'm not really afraid to hide that. They're setting the expectations. I'm just telling you what they're telling me.
With a silver bullet.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, with a silver bullet, ladies and gentlemen. I feel like Justin Timberlake in the Social Network. He comes back and goes, "Just Facebook, it's cleaner. Drop the V." I messed that whole thing up, that paraphrase, but I'm good at doing that. All right, let's get back to my holes that weren't filled to my satisfaction. And you're right, by the way, you even heard Chip Kelly alluding to the defense, how good it is and how tough it is to look good against that defense, especially when you practice against each other every day. The cornerbacks and safeties and everybody else on the defensive side are are used to going against the wide receivers, even Jeremiah Smith, spinning his first spring, and they're used to their moves by the 15th day of practice. So it's hard to get a big time play, especially when it's stud. But then when you take the sort of the studs out of the thud and you make it tackle, it makes it still like hit or miss. That spring game went about exactly as I in my head thought it would. You were just hoping for a little bit more spectacular action. And
Yeah.
the most spectacular play was the last play of the game when Deontay Griffin intercepted Aaron Nolan's pass at the goal line, desperation pass at the goal line, and returned it for looked like a touchdown. As I quipped to Ryan Day, is it now tradition that a Griffin will score the last touchdown in a spring game? Because we remember the touchdown that Archie Griffin scored the year before. That was a pretty good. I tied him in the 40 that day. I think he ran like a 4-minute, 4-second 40, but he still got to the end zone. But man, I still don't understand the scoring system from Saturday that at the end still awarded the offense the win. Did you get that?
I think the pick six was blown dead, so it didn't count, but it sure looked like it counted to me. Um, and yeah, the whole scoring system in general, I think there's a better way, Tim.
Yeah, as I said after the game, it was like the Stanford band. They had taken the field and but they didn't throw a flag that day, ladies and gentlemen. They did not throw a flag that day. Cal won that game. Right guard. I don't know who the right guard is. I mean, I've been thinking all through spring the right guard was going to finally be Luke Montgomery. Lo and behold, we look out there, the first scrimmage plays they ran with Will Howard at quarterback, which was a little bit of a change from what we'd usually seen Devin Brown taking those first snaps. So that's a little bit of a peek into the pecking order, right, at quarterback. But there's Carson Hinsman, last year starting center at right guard with Seth McLaughlin, in my opinion, celebrated transfer from Alabama at center, which is, I think a lot of us thought that was going to be a battle that Seth McLaughlin might win just based on his experience. Right on down the road there. But and then I think the next guy in at right guard, correct me if I'm wrong, might have been Luke Montgomery, might have been Tegra Shabola, but they ran 3 or 4 guys through that spot. Spence, you're going into your 6th year covering Ohio State football, as I've said a couple of times already on this podcast. Who's going to be the right guard on? Is it August 30th? What is the date of the opener
31st.
against Akron? August 31st. Hey, unless TV changes it.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Stranger things have happened. Who's going to be the starting right guard on August 31st? Spencer Holbrook.
I like what I saw, to be honest, from Tegra Shabola at that spot on Saturday. I did. I thought he moved his feet well. I think he looks fluid at guard. A lot of people think he's a tackle because the length he has, and I agree with the length. I think that he looks like a tackle, but he almost plays like a guard, Tim. And
Yeah.
if you can get the athleticism of a tackle in at guard, do it. And unless Ohio State finds a right tackle in the transfer portal that can slide Josh Fryer into right guard, and I just don't I have a hard time believing that there's going to be an Ohio State caliber right tackle in the portal. I think the options are on the roster. Give me Tegra Shabola at right guard and Seth McLaughlin at center. And the reason I say that is because we saw Carson Hinsman at right guard. We didn't see Seth McLaughlin at right guard. We saw him play center and center only. And I think that's telling. So, they're weighing their options there. I still think Luke Montgomery is a good player. This is not to say that he's going to lose the battle. I just think maybe Tegra Shabola might step in and win it. And I like what he did there on Saturday, and he kind of showed me that he can play right guard at a high level.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote that story about him in the middle of spring, you remember that, where basically no one cares was his motto going through the spring, that in essence, nobody cares if you've had a, tough road to hoe to this point, whether you have or haven't gotten your shot, what ailments or maybe off-field problems you've had. Once you step over the red line, as they say in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, onto the practice field, you're expected to bring it, with no excuses. And I think Tegra Shabola, there's a momentum there for him that I think they want to tap into if they can get to it, and I think Josh Fryer should be the right tackle based on his experience from last year, but based on he's a totally different looking big man than he was 3 years ago. You agree with that? I mean,
Yeah.
he's been through the Mickey Marotti washing machine several times now and has come out looking crisper and cleaner, man, in my opinion. And I think they want to take advantage of that and the leadership that he can bring also, being a returning starter at a position. And then Seth McLaughlin, I like Carson Hinsman. I think he's got a huge upside. Seth McLaughlin started in essence the last 2 years for Alabama. It's kind of like the quarterback position in my mind. When in doubt, go with the guy that has the more experience. If in fact he's good enough, and I
Yeah.
think Seth McLaughlin is definitely good enough, go with that guy. And then as the season goes on, if you need to make some changes, you do it. Just like I do believe they're going to bring Julian Saying along as the season goes along. But I came out of the spring pretty much in my mind thinking it's a two-man battle for the starting job, with probably Will Howard leading the way just based on his experience. And I'm talking about Will Howard and Devin Brown. I'm with you. Hey, by the way, uh, speaking of wanting to know where things stand, I want to jump real quick to your buddy and mine, Pete Nakos, in the transfer portal. He's been busy all day. Like I said, Truth in Advertising, we're recording this on a Tuesday. But the bottom line is he's been sitting there in front of the transfer portal watching people more pop in than pop out so far. So let's just take a peek at what's going on with Pete Nakos. Hey, look at this, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting an up close and personal live look into the on3.com Pete Nakos Command Center for the transfer portal. Pete Nakos, welcome once again back to the Tim May Show, but I don't want to interrupt you very much here. We're talking about, as we record this, it's late on Tuesday afternoon, and you and your colleagues at on3.com have been posting one after the other of transfer portal entries. Just how busy has it been today? And this is going to be airing like a day later, but how busy has it really been today?
It's been busy, Tim. It's been a lot of it's not December, right? Like December was every time you refresh the transfer portal, it was like, oh wow, like Kyle McCord's in. Like, oh yeah, Dylan Gabriel's in at 10:30. Yeah, it's not been like that. It has been a lot of backups and depth players and a lot of FCS and group of five guys who have a really strong resume and are trying to play at a higher level.
Yeah. Ohio State, as we talk, Ohio State, I think has had only 2 entries so far. Where Dallin Hayden, who we all expected, you guys broke that story like last week that he was
Yeah.
going to be entering the transfer portal, the running back. And then of course Cedric Hawkins, I think, is the other guy so far. Do you anticipate much activity from Ohio State as far as the ingoing into the transfer portal?
Yeah, so we're at 2 now, like you mentioned. I know some people put it at 7. Wouldn't be surprised if they hit that number. I think the big thing I'm looking at is do they add some folks on the offensive line? They got to lose a couple of scholarship players to hit the 85-man mark.
Right.
And what does that quarterback room look like come fall? That could be, it's funny, it could be a lot of things, Tim. It could have the 5 still there. It could be get down to 2, and I wouldn't be surprised. There's a lot that could happen here.
Yeah, it's totally up in the air, as you say. And I'm reminding people, I'm being a little melodramatic here about looking in live at the Pete Nakos Command Center on the transfer portal. By the way, nice command center. It looks almost like your house or your apartment, but your condo, whatever it is you've got. But this is just the opening day of the transfer portal, where guys can get in as late as April the 30th. I have that date correct?
Spot on.
Yeah. And the bottom line is you can enter up until then,
Right.
but then you can sign, if you're in it, you can sign, between now and the start of the football season, right? I mean, for the most part.
You just got to put your name in. And as long as you enroll somewhere before the fall semester starts and all your academics are straight by fall camp, you're all set.
Yeah. Hey, Pete, give people a little bit of insight on how you're doing your job. Like, as we look at you right now, I mean, obviously it looks like you're just talking to some dude on the internet on Zoom, but you're actually monitoring as we sit here. But what does it take to monitor the transfer portal from your vantage point?
A lot of coffee. I also have 2 monitors, so I'm still looking at the transfer portal at the moment when I talk to you. There's really nothing else special to it than that. I try to type as fast as possible. I don't have some like big keyboard or anything like that. It's just me, my laptop and my monitor.
Yeah, you need someone to dictate to there. That way it's like stream of consciousness. But you also, I think, occasionally are in touch with some of the uh, player representatives, for one another term now in this modern world, this NIL world, right? That they're allowed to have. And, uh, they sometimes put out information because it also looks good for their client, for one of another term, right? I mean, to get the name out there as soon as possible and to find out who's interested.
Spot on. It's just like NFL free agency now. And if anyone tells you it isn't, they're lying. You
Yeah.
would be stunned how many agents hit me up trying to get their name out there and trying to get their client's name out there. And it's all an information game. So it's fascinating. And for me, a young guy who like grew up watching college football, I know this isn't how it was like a decade ago. So it's even funnier to me.
Yeah, this isn't how it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, man.
Yeah.
I mean, real quick, I wanted to ask you this, just, this is a little personal opinion from you, but do you like, I mean, obviously it keeps you employed and you're doing a hell of a job. You're a great reporter for On3, and I think I've lavished praise on you many times when you've been on with me, but do you like this aspect of major college sports right now, in particular major college football, about how much or how much teams can change of a guy just whimsically wanting to go somewhere else? I mean, do you like that? I mean, you grew up, I would think, a college football fan.
Yeah. So on a personal level, I love it. It's a huge adrenaline rush just trying to figure out where guys are going and things like that. And I love my job and I love trying to track stuff down. I guess on a macro level, though, as like a college football fan, I don't have a problem with it. I think that the way I look at it is for 100+ years, right? Athletes really had no freedom of what they wanted to do if they wanted to transfer. I mean, you know better than me, Tim, but if an Ohio State player wanted to transfer, odds were they weren't allowed to transfer inside the Big Ten
Yeah.
for so many years. So,
Or couldn't go on scholarship, but they could
yeah,
transfer inside the Big Ten, but couldn't go on scholarship. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm all for it. I think that the windows are good. I think that the multi-time transfers that we're seeing now, because the NCAA is losing lawsuits in court, is making it a little crazier. And I think that we're probably headed towards a situation where maybe some programs like are gonna not be able to hit the 85-man mark that they want to get to. And I think we're closer to that than people realize.
Isn't that amazing? Hey, real quick, if there was a big name on the first day, but it wasn't a big name because you guys had already put it out there that was going to happen, was Caden Proctor. And it looks like, I don't know if he said anything since I last checked on this day as we're recording this, which is transfer portal opening day. That's a portal opening, but possibly going back to Alabama after spending only 3 months at Iowa. Big time tackle from Alabama.
Yeah.
Is that the biggest name of the day or the so far?
So I don't view it as the biggest name of the day. He's already announced, like, I don't know, 2 hours after he went back in, that he's going to Alabama officially. He was at A-Day this weekend. To me, the biggest name to go in so far is Monday. The Penn State wide receiver, Keandre Lambert-Smith, went in. He might turn out to be the most experienced wide receiver who pops in. And then the other one that I'm keeping an eye on is the Oregon State running back Damian Martinez.
Yeah, he's got a few SEC schools that he's interested in, and vice versa, right? I mean, it could be interesting there. Hey, last thing for you, was the biggest losers, maybe not the right term, because a lot of these guys are whispered in their ear, maybe you should try the portal, right? It's a kind of a two-way street when it comes to guys getting into the portal. Some leave abruptly, some leave maybe not getting to where they thought they would get on the depth chart in the spring, and some are kind of whispered to, you're never going to get there, right? I mean, let's face it. I mean, by their existing team, but is Colorado's had a few guys jump in on the first day of it. Is that team taking the biggest hit, or how would you describe it?
I think that is the team that I'm going to be watching. I mentioned the 85-man mark. That is what I've circled. Really interested to see how Deion Sanders handles this.
Yeah.
And lost some offensive linemen today. Do they need to retool that? How do they put a roster together in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, because I was going to say offensive line was where they seem to be their weakest for for the most part, as the season went on, they could use some depth there more than anything else. Hey, Pete Nako said, it looks like you're about to go down uh, go down into the portal again to figure out what's going on. But last thing, is this fun?
This is a blast. But as you just saw me kind of like look down and stuff, I got a text message about some breaking news. So it's kind of nonstop. I'm very thankful my family and my girlfriend understands. And
Cool.
but yeah, I love the job.
Hey, it's breaking news, so you can tell us right now. This isn't running till a day later. What is it?
Houston wide receiver Sam Brown is going to enter the transfer portal. He is going to be the most sought after receiver in the portal. It's going to
There you
be
go, ladies and gentlemen. Just a
very
look in live with Pete Nakos, looking live to tape, to digital recording. Pete, thanks again for joining the Tim May Show, my man.
Thanks, Tim. Talk to you soon.
Hey, I'm gonna start calling that segment. I may do that some more, Spence, calling it a peak with Pete or Pete's Peak. But it is interesting, man. He was, especially at the beginning of this week, he was working almost 24/7. You know, girlfriend on hold, family on hold. What's going on in the portal? It's funny how people find importance in their life, and then right now for him, it's the transfer portal. But that's pretty tough sitting there monitoring everybody who's going into it, right?
Yeah, but he does a great job. And then he's
Oh
got
yeah,
those sources telling him, where guys are visiting, what's going on. I think he's got an intel piece for On3 right now, kind of gives
yeah,
the lay of the land on some of these top prospects. Like, hey man, Pete's got it figured out. And we're not, it's a long way from he and I covering MAC football together a few years ago. This is as the old saying goes, we're not in Kansas anymore. I say we're not in Athens anymore. This man's doing some big time work.
yeah. Peek in with Pete. Real quick, as we record this, I think Ohio State still only has two guys who have declared for the portal. Am I right?
Yes.
Dallin Hayden and Cedric Hawkins. That neither one of them were much of a surprise to me because Dallin Hayden let it, on 3.com was the first to report it last week that he was going to be going into the portal like several days after he basically told us how he was competing at Ohio State. So, those interviews during spring and post spring can be totally different, as we found out. Real quick, does Ohio State, do you expect several other guys to get into the portal before it closes on April 30th?
Yeah, I would expect a few more from Ohio State to pop into the portal. Whether that's we don't speculate. One thing I pride ourselves on,
Right.
is we don't speculate on who could enter the portal. I think it's important to let these guys go through the process and finish their business before they announce that. And we just choose not to try to figure out who might go in. We just report on who does go in.
Well, wait a minute. Let's be truthful here. We do try to figure it out, but we don't necessarily blurt it out. I mean,
there you go.
We've got our eyes on several positions where people are overflowing, or like I mentioned on Saturday, the post scrimmage video we did with our friend and colleague Andy Backstrom. Some guys can be getting offers right now through their third uncle or whatever their agent, as for want of another term to call them, who are destined to be a backup again this year at Ohio State. Is chock full of rosters as I've covered at Ohio State in terms of quality personnel, and you never know, because how much a guy wants to play as compared to how much he wants to be on a team that could be vying for a national championship this year. But you're right. You never know what's going to come out of the blue. But it wasn't a flood to the portal, though. I mean, that's the best way of putting it, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a credit to Ohio State for the way that it's built, the brotherhood, as they like to say, but the more generic term, the culture of the program is pretty strong. I think the other thing I wrote about it a little bit this morning at lettermenrow.com.
Right.
The NIL operation at Ohio State is pretty good right now. The Buckeyes have their house in order, if you will. And so the guys who needed taken care of from a monetary perspective, now that we can say things like that, they've been taken care of. And they're to the point where they don't need to go shopping for their own bag. So they can stay at Ohio State and be taken care of and play for a national championship. And then the other thing that I think is, the Buckeyes are not doing a whole lot in the way of recruiting this week because it's evaluation week at Ohio State. All most of the position coaches are still in the building having their exit interviews, evaluating the roster and telling guys where they stand. And, the first day was never going to be a flood for Ohio State because they're
Right.
still going through those meetings. now that we're getting on the other side of those meetings, coming out on the other side of them through that tunnel, I think you could see a couple different guys, whether that be, does something happen in the quarterback room? Does something happen along the defensive line where it's really loaded? What's the receiver position look like? Because the top of that depth chart appears to be settled. Again, we don't speculate on who could enter the portal, but we also have an idea of what the pecking order looks like at some positions. And if guys just aren't going to see playing time or they're being passed up by guys who are younger than them, it might be time to pack your bags and see if you can find somewhere to play. And, that's a credit to Ohio State, and it's a credit to players to be able to figure out, this is where I stand. I think I still can play. Let me go do that somewhere else.
Yeah. Hey, real quick before you go, in your mind, I think they could use another offensive lineman if they could find a quality dude, and an offensive lineman in the tackle realm, you know what I mean? Because if we're talking about, like you and I both like Tegra Shabola possibly playing that right guard spot, we'll see how it flows out. But, you've always had him penciled in more as a tackle. But do you think they could still use it? I mean, who knows who you're getting, right? Last year they got Victor Cutler and Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons went on to start, I think, every game at left tackle, and Victor Cutler transferred to Louisville. And he may be trying to transfer again. Well, who knows? But the point is there some spot there? Do you think they need to add a body in that realm?
I think it's tough, Tim, because you would love to, right? But also, like, I have a spreadsheet that keeps track of all the scholarships at Ohio State. There are 17 offensive linemen.
Right.
They've got another one coming in here in the summer, and Gabe Van Sickle, who they're pretty excited about.
Yep.
They're looking to take only 2 or 3 in the 2025 cycle because they know that the young talent on the roster that Justin Fry has accumulated is on its way up. And so you would love to, but do the numbers match up? Are you going to see any attrition in that room? If you do, then you could probably go out and find one. But here's the bigger thing. Ohio State is not going to lower its standard to find a body. I think the Buckeyes, if I'm being honest, in hindsight, which is always 2020, I think the Buckeyes did that a little bit in the way of Victor Cutler last year. And that's not an offense to Victor Cutler. It's more of a praise to the level of play at Ohio State and Georgia and Alabama. I think they lowered their standard a little bit, and then it didn't pan out. So you don't want to do that a second straight year just for the sake of bringing in a body. If there's not a guy who's Ohio State caliber in the transfer portal, and as of Wednesday at 11:09 a.m., there's not a guy that's Ohio State caliber in the transfer portal on the offensive line. I just don't see Ohio State doing it. And if you feel confident enough in Tegra Shabola and Josh Fryer and bringing Luke Montgomery along, so by the middle of the season, if somebody does get hurt, he can slide in there, or, a George Fitzpatrick can play tackle and Josh Fryer can slide in there. They've got a couple swing guys. Carson Hinsman can play guard. If you feel good enough about if you suffer a midseason injury and those guys are progressed enough by October or November, I don't see a need to bring one in. So it's pretty circumstantial, and I didn't mean to be long-winded there, but I see the need for one, but I see the need for an Ohio State caliber player. And I just don't see an Ohio State caliber player in the portal who can help them right now.
Isn't it interesting that the 2 linemen they brought in last year, Victor Cutler from Louisiana Monroe and Josh Simmons from San Diego State, and he was brought in after spring, Josh Simmons was, and ended up being a starter. Isn't it interesting that Victor Cutler, like you said, was a little bit of a throw of the dice? Josh Simmons is somebody Justin Fry tried to recruit when he was at UCLA, and he knew him and knew that the more he matured, especially physically, maybe an entity he could be at that left tackle spot. And he ended up being that as the year went on. I think you wrote about that in the middle of the spring too. I mean, he got his act together more and more and got more acclimated to Ohio State, and there he was. So recruit what you know, recruit who you know, right? I mean, that's kind of the bottom line there. And don't be desperate. I agree with that. Hey, last 1B, my 1B last question. Is there somebody this spring? It's not the obvious Jeremiah Smith, we got, we keep saying that, and eventually we got to start talking about Jeremiah Smith again.
Yeah.
Because wow. But is there one guy this spring that you think, from your vantage point, as you look back on it, that people haven't talked much about, that you thought really made an upgrade for himself with this team?
Yeah, it's kind of tough because he had a little bit of a rough day on Saturday. I really, really liked, and to be honest, like, I enjoy watching certain guys. I enjoyed watching Bryson Rogers run routes this spring. I
Yeah.
enjoyed watching him get in and out of the routes, and I enjoyed watching him catch the football. I think at Cotton Bowl Media Day, I asked Emeka Ibuka about Bryson Rogers, and he said he's Mr. Consistency. He's got the highest catch percentage on the roster. Like
Yeah.
he just catches the football. And again, he had a little bit of a rough day on Saturday. I know he was probably kicking himself for that, but overall, the body of work in the entire spring, like don't discount what Bryson Rogers did in bolstering the depth in that slot position. They want to move Emeka Ibuka around a lot this fall, and Brandon Ennis being out sucked for Brandon Ennis and it sucked for Ohio State overall. But it's also great news for Bryson Rogers in the way that he was able to get reps. So now when Brandon Ennis is healthy, it's not Brandon Ennis or Bryson Rogers. It's probably Brandon Ennis and Bryson Rogers as
Yeah.
potential slot weapons for Ohio State. And if he can keep progressing, there's no reason that Brian Hartline won't trust him as, that Mr. Consistency to go in there and make some catches for Ohio State, not just against Akron or Western Kentucky or Western Michigan or Marshall early in the season, but if you need a first down against a really good Iowa defense, you need a good first down against a really good Nebraska defense that comes in late October. Like Brian Hartline may be able to rely on the sure hands of Bryson Rogers because of what he showed this spring, what he can carry that into with the summer and the fall. I really like what I saw from him.
Yeah, real quick, isn't it amazing that second thoughts, really thinking things through, listening to friends and peers and maybe others, how you can jump into the portal, realize you've probably not going to find paradise like you thought you would. But number two, am I running? I'm not going to claim he was doing this, but am I walking away from something that could be great down the road? Bryson Rogers went through that, and got in the portal, got out of the portal, climbed back into Ohio State, and it has paid dividends for him. There's a success story right there, in my opinion, and way away from maybe other college football players in this age to evaluate things. Sometimes it's better to stick it out and put in your work and you will be rewarded. And so we'll see this fall. He has proven, though, I think in the spring, that he could be a factor on this football team in some form or fashion. And we're talking about what will be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country once the preseason polls come out, maybe even number 1. Hey, Spencer Holbrook, you're always one of the great co-pilots out there. Appreciate you jumping into my jalopy of an airplane and helping me out on short notice, my man.
Tim, always appreciate you having me on and look forward to doing it again soon.
Hey, and until next week, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you then.